Good evening, friends. Today I want to talk about something extraordinary, the way God speaks to us not through words or visions, but through the fabric of our daily lives. Often these are not grand gestures, but subtle, almost imperceptible warnings. Are you listening? These aren't coincidences. They're calls for your attention. Every warning is an invitation, a chance to step out of the old and into the new. Good evening, friends. Today I want to talk about something extraordinary, the way God speaks to us. Often we look for signs in grand gestures, miraculous events, or powerful visions. But the truth is, God's voice is rarely loud or dramatic. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't demand, it nudges. And the question we have to ask ourselves is this: are we listening? Are we attuned to the quiet but profound ways God is trying to guide us? Think about this for a moment. How often do we rush through our lives, consumed by routines, distractions, and the noise of the world? We're so busy chasing goals, solving problems, and reacting to life that we rarely pause to notice what's happening beneath the surface. Yet it's in these overlooked moments, the stillness between our thoughts, that God speaks. He doesn't use words in the way we expect. Instead, he works through the patterns of our experiences, the pull of our intuition, and even the disruptions that shake us to our core. But here's the challenge: the signs God sends us are easy to miss. They don't arrive with neon lights or flashing arrows pointing the way. Instead, they come as feelings, circumstances, and synchronicities that stir something deep within us. They challenge us, unsettle us, and sometimes even frustrate us. And because these signs often make us uncomfortable, we tend to ignore them. We brush them off as coincidences or tell ourselves we're overthinking. But what if these moments of discomfort and disruption are not accidents? What if they are divine messages, warnings meant to guide us, protect us, and lead us towards something greater? Now, here's the key to understanding these signs: they require awareness. Awareness is the starting point of all transformation. It's the ability to step back, observe your life with clarity, and recognize when God is trying to get your attention. This is not about overanalyzing every little thing that happens, but about cultivating a deep sense of presence. When you're present, you can sense when something feels off, when a situation seems to repeat itself, or when your inner voice is telling you to pay attention. Consider this: have you ever experienced a persistent feeling that you're heading down the wrong path, even when everything seems fine on the surface? Or maybe you've noticed the same challenge showing up in your life repeatedly, as if the universe is trying to tell you something you've been unwilling to face. These aren't random occurrences, they're patterns. They're signs that God is trying to awaken you to something you need to change, something you need to learn, or something you need to let go of. And then there's the feeling of inner conflict, the unease, the restlessness, the sense that something isn't right. We often try to suppress these feelings, thinking they're a sign of weakness or failure. But what if they're actually a gift? What if that discomfort is God's way of telling you that you're out of alignment with your true purpose? Discomfort is not your enemy. It's a signal, a gentle but powerful reminder that you're being called to something higher. Sometimes God's warnings come in the form of disruptions, when life doesn't go according to plan, when something you've worked so hard for falls apart, or when you're forced to take a detour you didn't expect. It's easy to feel frustrated or defeated in these moments. But what if they're not setbacks at all? What if they're setups for something greater? God knows the plans he has for you, and sometimes those plans require removing what no longer serves you to make space for something better. Friends, the signs are all around us. They're in the quiet pull of your intuition, the moments of resistance, the patterns that refuse to be ignored. But recognizing these signs is only the first step. The real question is, what will you do when you see them? Will you trust them? Will you lean into the discomfort and allow it to transform you? God is always speaking. The question is, are we listening? Good evening, friends. Today I want to talk about something extraordinary, the way God speaks to us in our lives. We often expect divine communication to come in loud, unmistakable ways, dramatic miracles. vivid dreams, or undeniable signs that demand our attention. But the truth is, God rarely works that way. Instead, he speaks softly, through the intricacies of our everyday experiences. His guidance is subtle but profound, quiet yet powerful. The question we must ask ourselves is this: are we paying attention? Are we tuned in to the whispers of divine wisdom? In the rush of life, it's so easy to miss these signs. We live in a world that is loud and fast, where distractions pull us in every direction and our minds are cluttered with endless thoughts and worries. We are constantly reacting to what's in front of us: our work, our relationships, our struggles, and we rarely stop to reflect on what is happening within us. Yet it's in these moments of stillness, in the spaces between the chaos, that God speaks. And when he speaks, it's not always in ways we expect or want. Sometimes he sends signs that feel inconvenient, uncomfortable, or even painful. But these moments are not there to harm us, they are there to guide us. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever felt a sense of unease about a decision you were about to make, even though everything seemed fine on the surface? Or perhaps you found yourself stuck in a cycle, facing the same challenges over and over again, as if life were trying to teach you a lesson you hadn't yet learned. These aren't accidents. These are warnings, divine nudges to pay attention to what's happening around you and within you. God has a way of orchestrating events and experiences that compel us to pause, reflect, and adjust our course. But the challenge lies in recognizing these signs for what they are. It's easy to dismiss a recurring pattern as bad luck or a feeling of discomfort as overthinking. We convince ourselves that we're imagining things, or we're too busy to address them. However, the more we ignore these signs, the louder they tend to become. What starts as a whisper can turn into a roar if we refuse to listen. The key is to develop the awareness and humility to recognize when God is trying to get our attention. Sometimes his warnings come in the form of inner conflict. That nagging feeling of restlessness, that sense that something isn't right. It's easy to push these feelings aside or try to distract ourselves from them. But what if those feelings are there for a reason? What if they are God's way of telling you that you're not on the right path? Discomfort, while unpleasant, is one of the greatest catalysts for growth. It pushes us to examine our lives, confront our fears, and make changes that align us more closely with our purpose. There are also times when God speaks to us through disruption. When things don't go according to plan, when doors close unexpectedly, or when life seems to take a sudden detour, it's natural to feel frustrated or even defeated. But what if these disruptions are not setbacks but divine interventions? Sometimes the very thing we see as a failure or rejection is actually a blessing in disguise. It's God clearing the path, removing what no longer serves us, and redirecting us towards something far greater than we could have imagined for ourselves. God's voice can also be heard in our intuition, that quiet inner knowing that something is right or wrong, even if we can't logically explain it. Yet, in a world full of noise, it can be difficult to trust our intuition. We doubt ourselves, second-guessing the very voice that's meant to guide us. But intuition is one of God's most powerful tools for communicating with us. It's his way of guiding us toward decisions that align with our highest good, even when they don't make sense in the moment. So how do we respond to these warnings? The first step is to cultivate stillness in our lives, to create space to listen and reflect. When we quiet the noise around us, we become more attuned to the signs and nudges that God is sending. The second step is to trust what we feel and see, even if it's uncomfortable. Growth often requires us to step into the unknown, to let go of what is familiar but no longer serves us, and to embrace the possibility of something greater. God is always speaking to us. The question is not whether he's sending us signs, but whether we are willing to see them, to trust them, and to act on them. Life is full of divine guidance, but it's up to us to pay attention, to listen, and to align ourselves with the path that God has prepared for us. This is where transformation begins. This is where we step into our purpose. Good evening, friends. Today, I want to talk about something deeply transformative: the way God speaks to us in our everyday lives. Often we imagine that if God were to reach out, it would be through bold, unmistakable signs, something dramatic and undeniable that leaves no room for doubt. But that's not usually how it happens. God doesn't shout to get our attention. He whispers. He nudges. He uses subtle signs and moments to guide us. The challenge for us is not whether He's speaking, but whether we are paying attention. Are we listening? Are we open to receiving the messages that are meant for us? So many of us go through life caught up in routines, tasks, and obligations. We become so focused on our immediate goals and responsibilities that we lose touch with the deeper currents running beneath the surface. These currents, our feelings, our intuitions, our experiences, are often where God places His warnings. But in the busyness of life, it's easy to miss them. It's easy to dismiss a recurring thought, an uneasy feeling, or an unexpected disruption as just part of life. Yet, what if these moments are not random? What if they are intentional? What if they are the very signs you've been waiting for, pointing you towards something better or protecting you from harm? Consider for a moment the times in your life when you felt a nagging sense that something isn't right. Maybe it was a relationship that looked good on paper but left you feeling uneasy. Perhaps it was a job that provided stability but drained your spirit. Or maybe it was a decision you were about to make, and despite the logical reasons for moving forward, something inside you hesitated. These moments of discomfort, those feelings of resistance, they're not accidents. They're signals. They're God's way of saying, pay attention. Something here needs to change. But here's the thing: recognizing these signs requires awareness. And awareness isn't something that comes automatically. It's a skill, a practice, a state of being that we cultivate by slowing down, becoming present, and tuning into the rhythms of our inner and outer lives. When we develop this awareness, we start to see patterns that we might have otherwise missed. We notice the situations that keep repeating themselves, the emotions that keep bubbling to the surface, and the subtle ways that God is trying to guide us. Sometimes God's warnings come in the form of inner conflict. You know that feeling, the restlessness, the unease, the quiet sense that something isn't quite right. We often try to push these feelings away or numb them because they make us uncomfortable. But what if those feelings are there for a reason? What if they're not something to fear, but something to embrace? Inner conflict is often a sign that we're out of alignment with our true purpose. It's not there to punish us, it's there to redirect us. It's a call to pause, reflect, and ask ourselves, am I on the right path? Am I living in alignment with who I'm meant to be? Other times, God's messages come through disruption. A door closes, a relationship ends, plans fall apart. It's natural to feel frustrated or even heartbroken when these things happen. But what if these disruptions are not failures but divine interventions? What if God is removing something from your life because it's no longer serving you, or because He has something better in store? These moments of upheaval can be painful, but they're also opportunities. They're an invitation to trust that even when life doesn't go according to your plan, it's still unfolding according to His plan. And then there's intuition, that quiet, inner voice that speaks to you in moments of stillness. It's that feeling in your gut, that whisper in your heart, that sense of knowing that doesn't come from logic or reason. Intuition is one of God's most powerful tools for guiding us. But in a world that values noise and certainty, it's easy to doubt this inner voice. We question it, ignore it, or dismiss it as irrational. Yet, time and time again, when we look back, we realize that our intuition was right. Learning to trust this voice is an act of faith. It's an act of surrendering to the guidance that God has placed within you. The truth is, God is always speaking to us. Through our feelings, our experiences, our relationships, and even our challenges, He is constantly sending us messages. But it's up to us to listen. It's up to us to slow down, pay attention, and trust the signs we're given. The question is not whether God is guiding you. The question is whether you are willing to follow that guidance. So, my friends, take a moment to reflect. What signs might you be missing? What feelings have you been ignoring? What disruptions have you been resisting? These are not coincidences. These are invitations. They are opportunities to align with your purpose, to trust in divine timing, and to step into the life that God has prepared for you. Listen, trust, act. The transformation you seek begins the moment you choose to pay attention. Good evening, friends. Today I want to speak about something profound: the way God communicates with us in the quiet, often unnoticed moments of our lives. We often imagine that if God were to warn us or guide us, it would be through something dramatic and unmistakable voice, a miraculous event, or a sign so clear we couldn't possibly miss it. But God rarely works that way. His communication is more subtle, more intimate. It's woven into the fabric of our daily experiences, our emotions, and the situations we encounter. The question is, are we aware enough to notice? Are we open enough to receive what he's trying to tell us? Life moves quickly, and in our rush to get from one moment to the next, we often overlook the very messages that are meant to guide us. We live distracted lives, pulled in countless directions by our responsibilities, ambitions, and the endless noise of the world around us. In this constant state of motion, we become disconnected from the still, small voice within us. Yet it's in this stillness, in the pauses we rarely take, that God speaks. He doesn't force his messages upon us. He doesn't shout over the chaos. Instead, he whispers, waiting for us to quiet the noise and listen. Have you ever had an experience where everything seemed to be going well on the surface, but deep down, something felt off? Maybe it was a sense of unease about a decision you were about to make, or a feeling of restlessness in a situation that otherwise appeared stable. These moments are not random. They are signs, invitations to pay attention. God often warns us through our feelings, those subtle nudges that pull at our spirit, urging us to stop, reflect, and reconsider. But it's so easy to dismiss these feelings, to tell ourselves we're imagining things, or to push them aside in favor of what seems logical or practical. Yet the more we ignore these signs, the louder they tend to become. What starts as a quiet whisper can turn into a persistent discomfort, and if we continue to resist, it can escalate into more significant disruptions. God doesn't send these warnings to punish us or make us suffer. He sends them out of love, as a way of guiding us back to the path we're meant to follow. But to hear him, we must cultivate awareness. We must learn to recognize the patterns and messages he places in our lives. Sometimes these warnings come in the form of repeated challenges. Have you ever noticed the same issue showing up in different areas of your life? Perhaps it's a recurring conflict in relationships, a consistent struggle in your career, or a repeated feeling of dissatisfaction that you just can't shake. These patterns are not coincidences. They're God's way of calling your attention to something that needs to change, something within you or around you that is no longer aligned with his purpose for your life. The question is, are you willing to confront it? Are you willing to ask, what is this teaching me? What am I being called to let go of or move toward? Other times, God's warnings come through disruption. When something you've relied on suddenly falls apart, a relationship ends, a job is lost, or a plan unravels, it's natural to feel frustrated, hurt, or even abandoned. But what if these moments of upheaval are not setbacks but setups? What if God is clearing the way for something greater, something you couldn't have imagined for yourself? Disruption can be painful, but it's also an invitation to trust, to believe that even when things don't go according to your plan, they are still unfolding according to his plan. And then there's intuition, that quiet, inner knowing that speaks to us in moments of stillness. Intuition is one of the most profound ways God communicates with us, yet it's also one of the easiest to dismiss. How often have you had a gut feeling about something, a sense of certainty that you couldn't explain, only to ignore it and later realize it was right all along? Intuition is not irrational. It's a divine gift, a direct line of communication between you and God. But to hear it, you must learn to trust it. You must create the space for it to emerge, free from the distractions and doubts that so often cloud our judgment. God is always speaking to us. Through our feelings, our experiences, our relationships, and even our challenges, He is constantly sending us messages. But it's up to us to slow down, to quiet the noise, and to listen. The question is not whether God is guiding you, but whether you are willing to follow that guidance, even when it feels uncomfortable or uncertain. So, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. What signs have you been ignoring? What feelings have you been pushing aside? What disruptions have you been resisting? These are not random events. They are invitations. They are opportunities to align more deeply with God's purpose for your life. And when you begin to listen, when you trust the signs and act on them, you will find that God's warnings are not just warnings, they are gifts. They are the starting point for transformation, for growth, and for stepping into the life you were always meant to live. Good evening, friends. Tonight I want to share something that speaks to the very core of how we navigate life the way God communicates with us. We often expect God's messages to come through undeniable miracles or loud, unmistakable signs. But in reality, His voice is rarely loud. It's gentle, subtle, and deeply personal. God doesn't overwhelm us with His presence. Instead, He invites us to notice. He places signs, warnings, and guidance in the quiet moments of our lives, and it's up to us to listen. The question is not whether God is speaking, but whether we're tuned in to hear Him. So many of us live in a state of constant motion. Our lives are filled with responsibilities, goals, and distractions. We're busy chasing deadlines, nurturing relationships, and dealing with the challenges of daily life. In the midst of all this, it's easy to lose touch with the deeper signals around us. Yet God often speaks in ways that require us to slow down and pay attention. His warnings are not always dramatic. They're subtle whispers, soft nudges in our spirit, or patterns in our experiences that quietly repeat until we take notice. Think about those moments when something in your life feels unsettled. Maybe it's a decision you're about to make, and while everything seems fine on the surface, something within you hesitates. Or perhaps it's a recurring feeling of restlessness or unease that you can't quite explain. These aren't random emotions, they're signs. They're divine messages telling you to stop and reflect. But how often do we dismiss them? How often do we tell ourselves it's just overthinking or brush aside the discomfort because it's inconvenient? When we ignore these signs, they don't go away. Instead, they tend to grow louder. What begins as a quiet unease can turn into a persistent restlessness or a series of disruptions in our lives. These disruptions may feel frustrating, even painful, but they're not meant to harm us. They're meant to wake us up, to redirect us towards something greater. God's warnings are acts of love, not punishment. They're His way of guiding us back to the path that leads to our purpose and fulfillment. Sometimes these warnings show up as patterns. Have you ever noticed the same kind of challenge or conflict appearing repeatedly in your life? Maybe it's a strained relationship dynamic that keeps resurfacing, a recurring financial struggle, or a feeling of dissatisfaction that lingers no matter how much you achieve. These patterns aren't coincidences. They're signs that something deeper needs your attention, something within you or around you that requires change. God uses these patterns to nudge us toward growth, to encourage us to confront the things we've been avoiding, and to help us let go of what no longer serves us. Other times, His warnings come in the form of unexpected disruptions. A door closes, a relationship ends, a plan falls apart. It's natural to feel hurt or frustrated when these things happen. But what if these disruptions are not setbacks but divine interventions? What if they're not obstacles, but redirections? God sees the bigger picture, and sometimes He removes things from our lives to protect us or to make room for something better. The challenge is trusting Him when the path forward feels uncertain. Then there's the role of intuition. That inner voice, that deep sense of knowing, is one of the most powerful ways God communicates with us. It's that quiet but unmistakable feeling that tells you something is right or wrong, even if you can't logically explain it. Yet, in a world that prizes logic and certainty, it's easy to dismiss intuition. We second guess ourselves, rationalize our doubts, and ignore the very voice that's meant to guide us. But intuition is not something to be ignored, it's a gift. It's God's way of speaking to you directly, of aligning you with His plan for your life. The truth is, God is always speaking to us. He speaks through our emotions, our experiences, our relationships, and even our struggles. But to hear Him, we must cultivate a sense of awareness. We must create space in our lives to reflect, to listen, and to trust the signs He's giving us. This isn't always easy. It requires slowing down, embracing discomfort, and having the courage to follow His guidance, even when it doesn't align with our own plans. So let me ask you, what signs might you be overlooking? What feelings or patterns have you been brushing aside? What disruptions in your life might actually be opportunities in disguise? These are not random events. They're invitations to grow, to trust, and to step into the life that God has prepared for you. God's warnings are not just warnings, they're acts of grace. They're His way of protecting you, guiding you, and calling you to a higher purpose. But the power of these warnings lies in how we respond to them. Will you listen? Will you trust? Will you act? The transformation you seek begins the moment you open your heart and say, "Yes, Lord, I'm listening." Listen deeply, trust fully, and step boldly into the path He's showing you.